Reza Afshar is the executive director for Independent Diplomat, a non-profit, non-governmental organization that gives advice and assistance in diplomatic strategy and technique to governments and political groups. Reza, thanks very much for joining us here on TRT World. Now, as it appears, three-quarters of the UN General Assembly has condemned Russia's illegal annexation of Ukrainian territory. But given the fact that lately the United Nations has been subjected to a lot of criticism when it comes to containing conflicts across the world, does this vote even mean anything to President Putin?
Yes, I think it will mean something to President Putin in the sense that this was an overwhelming condemnation of the illegal referendums and the annexations conducted by Russia on the back of its illegal invasion of Ukraine. And the problem here for Russia is that it can't really win over anyone in the UN membership because most countries, well, all countries really, accept the cornerstones of international law, which are founded on sovereignty and territorial integrity. You cannot just go into someone else's country and take parts of it. If people supported the Russians on that, it would be a free-for-all and we'd be living in a world with no rules whatsoever. So Russia has pushed the boundaries over and over again of international law. It broke international law over and over again in Syria and continues to do so. It has done it in Georgia, it has done it in Ukraine. But what has happened here now is that they've overstepped by so much that they can't even rely on the usual suspects within the UN system to support them. So I think this will mean something to Putin, and I think it's going to start really stretching their traditional alliances. I can't imagine that the Chinese are particularly enamored by what is happening at the moment, and it's put them in a very uncomfortable position. They're a natural, normal ally of Russia at the UN, but this sort of thing is really going to stretch those kinds of relationships. And so I think Putin is going to find himself more and more isolated.
And Reza, this is what I wonder at this point. It's been almost 8 months since the war began in Ukraine. Tell me, what more do you think the UN can do at this point?
I mean, it's not really necessarily a matter of the UN. People talk about the UN as if it's a sort of entity that acts on its own. It's a collection of member states. And so the question is really, what can member states collectively do? And the answer is they're already doing a lot of it, and they're doing it, some of it through the UN system, and they're doing some of it outside of the UN system in coalitions. So the arming of Ukraine and making sure that it can defend itself. In this case, a lot of times people criticize that kind of action, but in this case, it's very justifiable because it is a matter of self-defense, legitimate and legal self-defense. And so that arming of Ukraine is extremely important. You've seen that it's having an impact. It is having an impact on Ukraine's ability to defend itself and push Russians out of the areas that they're taking, and they're having a lot of success with that. It isn't going to be easy, but the bottom line is that Russia is going to have to be pushed completely outside of the internationally recognized borders of Ukraine. That means all of eastern Ukraine. It also means Crimea. And I believe that with the continuing support that's been given to Ukraine and the continuing isolation of Russia, that I think if we keep that up, I think eventually Russia is going to find itself in a very difficult position and will be pushed out of all of Ukraine's territory.
Reza Afshar, thank you very much. Really appreciate your taking out the time.
Thank you.